Ballasting this middle section of the switch is perhaps the trickiest part of the whole job, and for two reasons. First of all, of course, we don't want to get any ballast in this throw bar assembly, because that could prevent the switch from operating correctly. But also, we don't want to have any ballast remaining on the tops of these ties. These point rails have to slide across these ties, and anything that's impeding its path will prevent the switch from operating correctly. To demonstrate this, if I take a single piece of ballast and place it on top of this tie here, when I try to close the point rails, they don't close correctly anymore, and this could derail a train, and also it could break the switch permanently. So you need to be very careful and make sure there are no pieces of ballast anywhere on the ties in this section. We're going to start ballasting this middle section just like we would any other section of track. We're going to take our cup of ballast and just gently pour a small amount in there. Now, it's better to pour too little than too much. So just go a little bit at a time. And then we're going to take our brush and slowly work that ballast down between those ties. Now there's a lot of nooks and crannies in here, a lot of angled pieces of rail, so you got to work really hard to get that ballast down in there so you don't have any gaps. Alright, now we're going to need a little more ballast, so instead of using the cup this time, since most of the ballast is in there now, I'm just going to use a pinch in my fingers and just drop it in there a little at a time. Okay, that's looking good up front there. Now, like I said, there's little nooks and crannies that you have to get this ballast into, so a lot of times I'll put the brush at an angle, because in here is where that ballast needs to get. And a lot of times it'll help if you move the point rails, you can get a better idea of which areas are missing ballast. Okay, it's looking pretty good here. What I need to do now is make sure that there's no ballast on top of these ties, because as I mentioned earlier, any ballast on top of these ties in this area right here is going to cause problems. Okay, that's looking pretty good. So now I'm going to give it a test. Oh, what's this? The rails aren't closing right. Well, if I pull this rail back here, I can see that I missed a piece of ballast. Get that. Okay, now we've got good closure. The point rails are moving smoothly. That looks good. And the last thing I'm going to do is fill in these gaps right here in front of the throw bar. Okay, everything is looking pretty good. I'm going to give everything a once-over to see if I missed any places. I messed up the ballast a little bit here, so I'm going to fix that. If I take off this piece of tape and try to move the switch, you can see that it's moving very well. It's not impeded by anything. So now we're going to hit the ballast with our wetting agent before we put the glue down. The wetting agent in this case is isopropyl alcohol, which I have a spray nozzle attached to. And if you don't know what a wetting agent is, you can go back and look at my first video on ballasting, and I explain what a wetting agent is and what it does. You can do that by clicking on the link that's popping up on this video right now. So, let's go ahead and do it. I'm going to spray this isopropyl alcohol on this track here. I already did this section down here, so I'm just concentrating on this area that I haven't done yet. Now it's time to apply our glue. So I've got a cup full of our diluted white glue, and I've got an eyedropper full of the glue, and we're going to just start applying the glue with the eyedropper. I'm going to do the outside edges first. And I'm just working my way down the slope with this eyedropper, saturating the ballast with glue. And it's usually a good idea to have too much glue rather than too little. Okay, that takes care of this side, so let's get over to this side. I'm going to do this side just like this. Just slow and steady with the eyedropper until I've got this whole side done. Okay, we've put glue on both sides of the switch now, so the only part left is to put glue in this middle section. We've already done everything up to the point rails in the middle, so I'm just going to put glue from here to here. So I'm going to start back here with my eyedropper. And just slowly and carefully saturate this ballast with glue. You want to try not to get any glue on the rails or on the ties. There are sections of ballast that you're not really going to be able to get the eyedropper directly over because they're either under the point rails or under this middle rail here, and so the trick is to saturate the ballast enough where the glue will be wicked under there and saturate the ballast that you can't get to directly. Okay, all the glue's down, everything's done. The only thing left is to clean up this switch, get all the excess glue off the rails, and this project's done. Okay, I've cleaned the rails on this switch and all the glue on the ballast is dry, so the last thing to do is test the switch and make sure it's working correctly. I'm going to start by throwing the switch a few times and make sure that it throws smoothly and consistently each time. And it does, so that's good. The next thing I'll do is test the non-derailing feature of the switch by pulling these point rails over and then letting them snap back. And I'll try that in both directions. And it looks good. But what if it doesn't look good? What if you find that when you throw the switch, it's getting stuck on something, or when you test the spring reaction, the rails don't snap all the way back and they get stuck? Well, I'm going to show you a couple quick troubleshooting tips that will hopefully help you work through any problems that you may encounter. If you find that you're having trouble throwing the switch, usually the culprit is some ballast that has gotten in some of the moving parts of the switch. So the first thing you want to check is on top of all these ties around these point rails and make sure that no pieces of ballast are preventing the point rails from closing completely. The next place you want to check is along this throw bar assembly and make sure that there are no pieces of ballast stuck down in there. And again, if there are, just get a pair of tweezers and work them out. And then the last place is the switch housing itself. Sometimes some ballast will work down into these holes and then interfere with the moving parts of the switch inside. So you'll need to pop off the top of this housing and get any pieces of ballast out of there with a set of tweezers. To take the switch house covering off, I move the throw mechanism to the middle there, and then I take a small flathead screwdriver and just gently pop up the cover, and there you go. And just make an inspection, and if you see any pieces of ballast stuck in there, get a pair of tweezers and take them out. And then when you're done getting the ballast out, make sure that you've got all the switch parts in there correctly and that they're moving correctly, and then finally put the cover back on the switch housing. If you find that the spring action on these rails is not what it should be, and that when you pull these point rails back they don't snap back to the other side like that, usually the culprit is that you've gotten some glue on these ties, and that glue has dried into a film, and the film is preventing the rails from smoothly gliding along the ties like they should. So the first thing you'll want to do is get a pair of tweezers and work out any obvious globs of glue in here. After that, get a Q-tip and soak it in either hot water or isopropyl alcohol and scrub these ties over and over until you get all that glue out and the spring action returns to the rails. It may take several applications, but eventually it will work and you will get the spring action back. So that's about it for this project. I'll see you next time.